The question came up by this user up here who asked why I would be running CachyOS kernel, and instead of just running CachyOS and doing that instead, which was a great, fantastic question. I loved it. So I did a entire write-up on kind of my thoughts with it. It's over on moidy.com. I'll put the link down in the description below. And I thought it was a great question. I thought I'd do a video regarding that particular topic. When it comes down to the kernel, that is the specific piece of software that directly interacts with the hardware on your system. If there's a program that needs to actually request for resources from like the CPU or the USB drivers or your audio stack or something like that, that actually isn't talking directly to the motherboard and the CPU and saying, hey, this is what I need. It's actually asking the kernel. The kernel is the thing that has access to the hardware level. It's one of the reasons why Linux users are kind of against the idea of anti-cheat, because if it actually has kernel level communication, that means it also has communication to not only your entire system, there's potentially unfettered access to your entire system, but it also has access to your hardware itself and can control and do things and scan what's going on in the background and what processes you're doing, those kind of things, because that's kind of what an anti-cheat does. Anti-cheat is malware. It's just malware that we allow. That's how, your computer communicates, right? That's how programs get access to you using like your GPU to render the pretty graphics that are on your screen. That's how software gets access to being able to use RAM, so this way it can actually store data that can be processed by the CPU. So when it comes down to the actual kernel that you're running on your system, you can stick with the stock, basically the way that Linus Torvalds created it, Arch, kernel, the kernel that's used with Debian or Fedora or whatever, Ubuntu. There's nothing wrong with using that. However, if you want to do a few more optimizations to specifically focus on, hey, I want to prioritize these types of things, you can do modifications to those kernels. Now, I'm not advanced enough to understand how to modify the kernel. I played with BIOS back in the day, a long time ago, and modifying those things, but that was, decades in the past that this people over at CachyOS have happily gone off and modified it to optimize it for specific use cases, specifically gaming and creative. And since I do content creation and I like to play video games, it's kind of a win-win. Now, the other thing is that CachyOS has built-in schedulers. So you can actually select those specific, targets of the things that you want. Similar to what you're doing with Arch itself. If you're doing the LTS, so long-term support, or you're doing the hardened kernel, or you're doing the Zen kernel, those kernels are specifically modified to function in a certain way, right? To allow the system to communicate in ways that are predefined or prioritize tasks of certain natures over the top of others. So if you notice here, I have Bohr Scheduler as the thing that I have selected. Now, unfortunately, I am currently running the LTO because apparently I forgot to switch it after my last demonstration video, but it doesn't really affect right now. I think LTO is link time optimization. I can't remember. But when it comes to the Bohr, that's going to be any interactive tasks. So that's going to be things where the user is directly putting input in. So things like gaming can be that, word processing, web browsing, things like that. It's going to allow for a little bit more optimization. And with that level of optimization, you may or may not notice any difference between that kind of interaction in your system. So it can be somewhat subjective. Some people, find that it's very helpful. Some people find that it's not very helpful. I personally find that it's helpful, and I can feel a slight difference in the way my computer performs. I'm saying it's subjective because I've had some people who are like, no, there's just no reason to worry about a Bohr schedule. And that's fine. That's entirely up to you. You can stick with stock Linux. But one of the other things that I'm doing when it comes to this challenge is the point is to not stay on stock Arch. I'm not building CachyOS. That's not really what I'm doing by using CachyOS packages and the actual CachyOS kernel. I'm using that as just kind of like one of those examples of like, hey, you don't have to use specifically these repos that come stock. And there's some things that are more useful in there, like Proton Plus is just part of that repository, as just one of the examples, as well as the CachyOS Kernel Manager. So I want to keep all of that up to date, so I keep that installed. And sure, over time, it's going to start replacing some of those packages as I do updates. That's just going to be kind of the nature of it, and I understand like that's going to be an outcome. But it shouldn't cause any, conflicts. At least I hope it shouldn't in the long term. Just remember, I'm, also somewhat new to this myself. I just have some level of background and experience when it comes to handling Linux after playing with it for, more than a decade. I don't even know how long I've been playing with it since I was 9, and I'm in my mid 30s. So yeah, anyways. The other thing, though, to take into consideration when we're doing something like swapping our kernels is the concept that if we're not running in a way where we're being kind of careful about it, a perfect example being this version option here. We can run a release candidate kernel. Oh, I don't see any release candidate kernels. Okay, anyways, we can run a release candidate kernel. They do pop up in, they did pop up in here at one point. I don't know where it went. But and that can result in bricking things. CachyOS kernel is running off of the same concept as Acrh, where it's kind of being, the bleeding edge concept. So we want to be careful about the things we're doing. If we have something that's running stable and we have something that's, categorized as stable, we should be okay. Obviously, there's always chances that things can go wrong, but I also want to encourage you to play with it. This is Linux. The whole concept behind Linux is that you have control over your system. So let's play with it. Let's optimize it. Let's make some changes. Let's do different things. Let's throw in a different terminal that we would like to use. And instead of using bash, we can use something like fish. I'm going to use fish. We already know what I'm going to do. Goodbye, Mr. Moth. Goodbye. So, I give a little bit more of a breakdown, more detailed breakdown here. Largely the same words that I've already spoken, though, for the most part. That's just where we're at. So I wanted to get out a video so this way I could kind of talk about this. I've got a few different things that I'm working on. We're about to go in. We're going into week 2, so I'm going to be doing a little bit of modification here over the next day and a half, and I'll show you guys where we're at, and we'll jump into that. I got some fun plans, so stick around. Don't be afraid to dive under the rift.